My name is Linda Morrison. I'm 33 years old and work part-time as an accountant 3 days a week. The rest of my time is dedicated to raising my 7-year-old daughter, Hannah. This is a record of an unbelievable event that happened to our family. I met my husband Stephen when I was a senior in college. We were in the same volunteer circle, helping underprivileged children with their studies. I still remember how I was captivated by his gentle smile and the way he interacted with the children. Even back then, he was caring and beloved by everyone. It's been 8 years since we got married. We live in a quiet suburban neighborhood. There's a small flower bed in front of our entrance where colorful tulips bloom in spring. On weekends, we can hear neighborhood children's laughter reaching our yard, and everything seems peaceful. However, behind this tranquil daily life, I was constantly dealing with stress. It's about my relationship with my in-laws. Particularly with my mother-in-law, Barbara, there's a deep divide over educational policies. Barbara worked as an elementary school teacher for 30 years and has strict, uncompromising values when it comes to education. While she appears gentle and kind on the surface, her words are often laced with criticism. Linda, I'm concerned about Hannah's math test scores. When I was teaching, we made sure to thoroughly cover the basics. Arts are important too, but I'm a bit worried that she's so absorbed in arts and crafts at this age. She throws such comments at me during her monthly visits. I would sigh deeply inside while desperately trying not to bend my principles of raising children with love. My husband Stephen works as a construction site supervisor from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. He has a personality that tends to avoid getting involved in family issues. On his days off, he prefers to rest at home due to work fatigue and doesn't try to improve the relationship with his parents. That's just Mom's way of showing love. She's always been passionate about education. Every time I see him dismissing the issue like that, my sense of loneliness deepens. And then there's our daughter Hannah. A first grader at public school, she's a cheerful girl who loves drawing. While she's sociable like me, she becomes tense around her grandparents and can't be herself. Recently, as her grandparents have become more critical of her school performance, she sometimes cries after returning home. My father-in-law, Charles, is a businessman who found success in real estate investment. On the surface, he appears gentlemanly and mild-mannered. However, he also holds old-fashioned values that emphasize his authority as the head of the family. While he helped us with part of our house loan, he often uses that as a reason to interfere with our family matters. This is all for your future. Our advice, based on our experience, will surely be helpful. His words always carry an air of authority that leaves no room for argument. It's a 30-minute drive from our house to my in-laws' home. That distance feels neither too close nor too far, just perfect. However, the monthly ritual of visiting them has become a psychological burden for me. The conflict over educational policies is particularly serious, and my husband seems caught between his parents and me. The fact that we receive financial assistance weighs heavily on us as a couple. My father-in-law's assistance sometimes becomes a tool for control. But with childcare in full swing right now, it's not realistic to refuse this help. For Hannah's sake, you should listen to our opinions more. You shouldn't skimp on educational investment. We know from experience. Every time I receive such words from my in-laws, I desperately try to protect my own parenting principles. I believe that showing love is the most important thing. But that day's events would become the moment when such daily friction exploded in an unimaginable way. It was a Saturday when a refreshing May breeze was swaying the tulips in the garden. Usually, it would be a peaceful weekend afternoon, but today was different. You see, today was my mother-in-law Barbara's birthday party. My heart was already heavy. I couldn't get yesterday's events out of my head. During my mother-in-law's monthly visit, the conversation that took place in the living room keeps replaying like a recorded tape. "Hannah, what did you get on your latest test?" As usual, my mother-in-law asked her granddaughter with a sociable smile. But her eyes weren't smiling. They were as sharp as an examiner's. 85 points. Hannah answered in a small voice. Her hands were clasped on her knees, clearly showing signs of tension. It was a withdrawn attitude unimaginable from her usually energetic self. "Well, you could do better, couldn't you? I heard Jessica next door got 95 points." The moment I heard those words, I felt a pain like my heart was being squeezed. Hannah is doing her best. She was selected for an art competition. I couldn't help but interject. I just wanted her to recognize my daughter's talents. Hobbies are fine, but basic academic skills are essential. My mother-in-law's words stabbed coldly as usual. Using her 30 years of teaching experience as a shield, she wouldn't accept any counterarguments. The conversation I had with Stephen that night went nowhere as usual. "Your mother's way of speaking is hurting Hannah," I quietly appealed while lying in bed. "That's just Mom's way of showing love. You're overthinking it. You always run away like this." My husband closed his eyes with a tired expression, avoiding any further conversation. And today, our family arrived at my in-laws' mansion in the Main Line district precisely at 2 p.m. The stone colonial-style house always has an overwhelming presence. When we entered, about 10 relatives had already gathered. The living room was filled with expensive catered food, and the scent of wine wafted through the air. In the formal atmosphere, relatives were enjoying conversations in small groups with subdued voices. "Oh, Hannah, aren't you going to wish Grandma a happy birthday?" My mother-in-law called out from her elegant sofa in the center of the living room. Hannah approached with a tense expression and presented the handmade card she had prepared. "Happy birthday, Grandma." "Oh, thank you. But the handwriting is a bit messy. You could have written more carefully." At that moment, I felt my body tense up. But it wasn't over yet. "Hannah, here's a special present from Grandma." Barbara exchanged glances with Charles, who brought a box from the back room. It was quite a large box wrapped in expensive-looking paper. "This will make you smarter. All the Wilson children are good at science," my mother-in-law announced proudly. The Wilsons were a doctor's family living nearby, often used as a point of comparison. "Thank you, Grandma." As Hannah received the box, my father-in-law said in a grave voice, "Use it every day. Grandpa specially selected this." Something in those words sent a chill down my spine. The unfamiliar educational toy box. The strangely glossy package. Something about them felt unnatural. More educational pressure. While muttering in my heart, I was desperate to maintain my smile. I couldn't disrupt the atmosphere here. But I should have been more sensitive to that sense of unease I felt then. The party proceeded formally and ended around 6 p.m. As we were leaving, my father-in-law insisted on the use of the educational toy more persistently than usual. That was the beginning of the nightmare. It was about 2 hours after we returned home from the party. Outside the window, dusk was falling, with early summer twilight lingering. In the living room, Hannah was working on her homework while playing with the new educational toy. I had just finished cleaning up after dinner and was watching her from the kitchen. "What a strangely glossy toy," I was muttering to myself while putting away dishes when I heard it. "Mama!" A faint voice called out. When I turned around, Hannah was slumped over her desk. "What's wrong, Hannah?" When I rushed over, my daughter's face was pale, with cold sweat on her forehead. "My head hurts. I feel sick." Her usually energetic voice was trembling. When I took her hand, it felt strangely feverish. I immediately went to get a thermometer to check her temperature. "You have a slight fever." Something was wrong. This wasn't just a cold. Hannah's breathing was shallow and rapid. Her eyes seemed unfocused. "How do you feel? Are you nauseous? The room feels like it's spinning." At that moment, the educational toy fell from Hannah's hand. The dry sound of it hitting the floor echoed strangely. I made an instant decision. "Let's go to the emergency room." Stephen had just called to say he'd be late from work. There was no time to wait. I quickly picked up Hannah and got her into the car. I could see her hands trembling slightly as she fastened her seatbelt. "It's okay, Mama's here with you." While saying this, my heart was beating like a drum. The drive to St. Mary's General Hospital. What usually takes 20 minutes felt like an eternity. Every time the traffic light turned red, I couldn't help but worry about Hannah's limp condition. "We're almost there, hang in there." Every time I heard a faint moan from the back seat, my foot pressed harder on the accelerator. Just before 9 p.m., we finally arrived at the hospital's emergency room. Dr. Johnson, the doctor on duty, immediately began examining Hannah. The female doctor in her 50s asked questions in a calm tone. "Did anything unusual happen today?" "We went to my mother-in-law's birthday party, received a new educational toy." While I was talking, nurses in the treatment room moved quickly, measuring blood pressure and preparing for blood tests. The regular beeping of medical equipment heightened the quiet tension. "Do you have that toy with you now?" "It's in the car." While a nurse went to get the toy, Dr. Johnson silently continued checking Hannah's symptoms. Pupil response, temperature, pulse. Her efficiency gave me a slight sense of relief. However, that relief didn't last long. When the blood test results came back, the doctor's expression changed completely. "Mrs. Morrison." Dr. Johnson's voice suddenly became stern. "We need to call the police immediately. These symptoms are caused by contact with toxic substances." "What? What do you mean?" My voice was trembling. The scene before me suddenly felt unreal. The blood test detected special chemicals. Substances that shouldn't be in normal toys. At that moment, my sense of unease from the party came flooding back. My father-in-law's obsessive manner, my mother-in-law's proud expression, the unnatural gloss of the unfamiliar toy. This is not an accident. The doctor's words echoed heavily. Just then, I heard the treatment room door open and Stephen rushing in with hurried steps. However, to my ears, it felt like an event from a distant world. While looking at my daughter lying on the bed before me, I was overwhelmed by the sensation that our everyday life from just a few hours ago was slipping infinitely far away. "Linda. How's Hannah?" Stephen approached, breathing heavily. Still in his work suit, his tie was crooked, and sweat beaded on his forehead. "They say we need to call the police." At my words, my husband momentarily showed an expression of incomprehension. "What do you mean?" "The toy, toxic substances." At that moment, Dr. Johnson returned to the treatment room. In her hands were a thick medical chart and the educational toy sealed in a plastic bag. When Stephen saw it, I could see the color drain from his face. "This. Dad." His voice trailed off. "Yes, that toy was specially selected by his father." That fact now weighed heavily between us as a couple. As the machines in the treatment room quietly beeped, the darkness outside the window deepened. And somewhere in the distance, we could hear the sound of sirens approaching. Like an ominous premonition of what awaited us. The sound of footsteps in the hospital corridor grew gradually louder. 2 police officers and a detective in plain clothes appeared. Breaking the silence of the emergency room as midnight approached, they quickly assessed the situation. "I'm Detective Brian." The male detective in his late 40s looked tired, but his gaze was sharp as he watched us. "Here's the toy in question." Dr. Johnson handed over the educational toy sealed in an evidence bag. The detective put on rubber gloves and began carefully examining the toy. "The package looks authentic, but the manufacturing number is unusual." True to his words, the emergency analysis by the police forensics team revealed shocking results. Industrial toxic substances were detected in the toy, and furthermore, the package was found to be an elaborate counterfeit. According to the manufacturer, this product number doesn't exist. Near dawn, an even more surprising report came in. Decisive evidence was found in Charles Morrison's car. A receipt from an industrial supply store. A receipt from a printing shop that was commissioned to print the fake packaging. And an instruction manual for handling toxic substances. It had all been planned. Why would Dad? Stephen's voice was trembling. By Hannah's hospital bed where she lay exhausted, we as a couple listened to the police report. Only the sound of dripping fluid marked the heavy silence. "The suspect Charles Morrison has confessed." At 6 a.m., Detective Brian appeared before us with a tired expression. His voice seemed to contain a hint of pity as he prepared to relay the results of the interrogation. "The motive is hard to believe." The detective paused for a moment and took a deep sigh. "The suspect said he planned to remove Linda from the household to change your daughter's educational environment." At those words, I felt all strength leave my body. He thought that if your daughter became ill from the toxic substances, he could sue for child neglect. That's what he was thinking. My father-in-law's confession went far beyond our imagination. He stated that considering his granddaughter's future, this level of sacrifice was acceptable. Twisted love. It seemed nothing short of madness. His dissatisfaction with educational policies escalated. The detective continued. Furthermore, he thought that by strengthening financial control, he could eventually gain custody. The loan assistance. It was a tool for controlling us. Looking back, my father-in-law's attitude of being overly concerned about monthly repayments and interfering with educational policies, was it all part of the plan? Why didn't Mom know? To Stephen's question, the detective quietly shook his head. His wife knew nothing. Even the presentation of the toy at the party was just following her husband's instructions. My mother-in-law Barbara was also a victim. Looking back, perhaps her proud manner at the party came from genuine feelings for her granddaughter. Outside the window, dawn was breaking. The morning sun streaming into the hospital room illuminated the face of our daughter sleeping innocently. The doctor's words that the effects of the toxic substances were temporary and would recover in a few days provided slight comfort. However, the reality that our family would face from now on would be harsher than we could imagine. Grandfather's arrest. Media coverage. And most painful of all, how to explain this to Hannah. When your father's trial begins. Stephen gripped my hand tightly, cutting off my words. The feelings conveyed in that grip were almost painful. In the morning sun, we quietly strengthened our resolve to face new challenges. It was a Saturday, 1 week after the incident. Hannah had been safely discharged and was resting at home. As the doctor had said, the effects of the toxic substances were temporary, and our daughter's condition was recovering steadily. However, the wounds in our family's hearts wouldn't heal so easily. That afternoon, we had to visit my in-laws' house again. Under police supervision, a final meeting was arranged while my father-in-law was under house arrest. As I drove, I remembered that day a week ago. The glamorous birthday party. The ominous feeling. And the terrifying discovery at the hospital. I wished many times that it had all been a dream, but reality mercilessly cornered us. "Are you okay?" Stephen, who was driving, looked at me worriedly. His eyes held fatigue and sadness. My husband must be carrying the deepest emotional wounds over his parents' actions. In the back seat, Hannah quietly gazed out the window. When we told her we were going to her grandparents' house, she said nothing. Just nodded slightly. That silence pains my heart. The stone mansion came into view. In just 1 week, the impression of this house had completely changed. The once dignified presence was gone, and now it seemed only a heavy shadow remained. Police vehicles were parked at the entrance, and 2 plainclothes detectives greeted us. When we entered, my mother-in-law was already seated in the living room. Barbara's appearance had changed dramatically in just 1 week. "Linda." "Stephen," she called out in a frail voice. Her profile had clearly aged. Having learned of her husband's crimes, she too had received an immense shock. Then, accompanied by a police officer, my father-in-law appeared. Charles Morrison. In just 1 week, his dignified atmosphere had vanished, and he looked like just a tired old man. "Sit down." My father-in-law's voice no longer carried its former authority. As we sat, a heavy silence dominated the room. The police officers quietly watched from the corner. Linda. Suddenly, my father-in-law addressed me. Something still seemed to burn in his eyes. You can't make my son or granddaughter happy. Go back to your parents' home. At those words, the air in the room froze. That controlling desire still hadn't disappeared. Stephen stood up and said in a strong tone, "That's enough. Linda is the best mother. Dad, your thinking is completely wrong." My husband's voice was trembling, but it had conviction. For the first time, I saw him directly opposing his parents. My husband, how could he? My mother-in-law suddenly collapsed into her seat. Her shoulders were trembling slightly. At that moment, Hannah, who had been quiet, slowly stood up. She walked deliberately toward her grandfather and looked straight into his eyes. In the tense atmosphere, Hannah's voice rang out. "You know what? I love Mama and Papa. I love drawing. I'm trying hard at my studies too. But I was very sad that Grandpa tried to break us apart." The words of a 7-year-old girl pierced painfully into our hearts. I could see the color drain from my father-in-law's face. For the first time, a look of regret appeared in his eyes. "Let's go home." I quietly stood up and took my daughter's hand. There were no more words left to speak here. Stephen silently opened the door, and the three of us went outside. The spring sunlight felt dazzling. Getting into the car, I looked at my in-laws' house in the rearview mirror. The once dignified mansion now seemed to tell the story that everything was over. "Mama," Hannah called out softly, "can I draw pictures in the park this Sunday?" At those casual words, I suddenly felt tears welling up. This is our new beginning. I felt this was the first step in healing our wounded hearts, slowly but surely. "Of course, Hannah." Stephen smiled gently as he gripped the steering wheel. The car slowly started moving toward our new life as a family of 3. 3 months have passed since then. Outside the window, the summer sunlight shines brightly. "Mama, look." Hannah, who was drawing in the park bench, proudly held up her drawing paper. A family portrait painted in vivid colors. Me, Stephen, and Hannah. The 3 smiling faces shine as brightly as the summer sunlight. My daughter's recovery was better than the doctor had predicted. The effects of the toxic substances have completely disappeared, and she's back to being the cheerful girl she was before. If anything, she seems to have grown stronger through this experience. At school, she's still passionate about drawing, and recently, her artwork was selected for the school exhibition. Her grades are gradually improving too, and most importantly, Hannah seems to understand in her own way the importance of working hard at her own pace. That's beautiful. Let's frame it and display it in the living room. At my words, Hannah beamed with a full smile. My father-in-law's trial concluded last week. He received a 3-year sentence, suspended for 5 years. The sentence took into account his age and lack of prior convictions, but this brought one chapter to a close. Stephen works diligently every day. We refused all financial support from his parents and reorganized our loan with the bank. While life has become a bit more challenging financially, my husband shows a rather bright expression, saying, "This is how it should be." And then there's my mother-in-law Barbara. Contact had ceased after the incident, but the other day, an unexpected letter arrived. To Linda. When I saw the sender's handwriting, I hesitated a bit, but gathered my courage to open it. For a long time, I was bound by wrong values. I still blame myself for not being able to stop my husband's actions. But when I heard Hannah's final words, I finally realized. Parenting isn't just about scores and grades. Love is what matters most. The letter, written in careful handwriting, had tear stains on it. I can't ask for forgiveness. But someday, if I could see Hannah's drawings again. At those words, I fell into thought. Certainly, it would be difficult to return to our previous relationship right away. But perhaps we could build a new relationship, little by little. I felt that possibility. "Mama, can we go get ice cream?" With the sounds of children playing in the park in the background, Hannah asks in a sweet voice. "Yes, it is hot today, isn't it?" We started walking along the park path. On the weekend, we have plans to go on a picnic with Stephen. Spending time together as a family has become the center of our new life. When we returned home at dusk, Stephen had come home early. "I'm home. I thought we could all make dinner together today." At my husband's suggestion, Hannah jumped with joy. "Yay! I'll make the salad." The shadows of the three of us in the kitchen are cast on the wall. Hannah's drawing hung in the entrance seemed to watch over us gently. Certainly, the events of the past won't easily disappear. But perhaps it was because we overcame this trial that we were able to gain true family bonds. At night, after Hannah had gone to bed, I looked out the window while having tea with Stephen in the living room. The starry sky sparkled as if blessing our new life. "Linda." Stephen quietly called my name. "Thank you. Because of you, I understand the true meaning of family." At those words, I returned a smile. Surely, various difficulties still await us in the future. But we're not afraid anymore. Because we have the strength to overcome them.